Hello, and thank you for joining us at today's TARGETjobs webinar, Women in STEM. My name's Rachel, and I'm the editor of the Engineering, Science and IT sections of TARGETjobs.co.uk. Today, I'm joined by Paris, an applications engineer at Cummins, and Katie, a software engineer at Arm. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you both if you could share a little bit more information about yourself, your experience, your background with the listeners today. Paris, could I start with you, please?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Like Rachel said, my name is Paris. I'm an applications engineer, or also known as a customer engineer, for a turbocharging company that's connected to a diesel engine manufacturer that's based out of the US. So the company is Cummins Turbo Technologies, and the technical headquarters are actually in Huddersfield in West Yorkshire, the UK. As you can probably tell by my accent, I am not originally from the UK. I am actually from Los Angeles. I've worked for Cummins for 7.5 years. First in the US as a manufacturing engineer. Then I moved to England, and I lived in Huddersfield for 4 years and worked in our advanced engineering department. And I'm actually currently based in Germany, where I've lived for the past year as an applications engineer. I have 3 degrees in engineering, one in a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering. I have 2 masters, one in mechanical engineering, and then another one in systems engineering. And I thoroughly enjoy what I do every day. And I'm hoping that from some of what we're talking about today, you all can find things that you enjoy every day.
Great, thanks very much, Paris. And Katie, how about you?
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I'm Katie, and I work as a software engineer for Arm in Cambridge. So I joined Arm after graduating from the University of Edinburgh with a degree in AI and computer science. And I'm now working in the area of CPU testing. So writing software to test the CPU designs that Arm create. And if you don't know what a CPU is, that stands for Central Processing Unit, which is basically like the brain in like phones and computers and things like that. So yeah, like I say, Arm is a tech company whose business model is kind of based around creating intellectual property. So Arm designs CPUs, instruction sets, GPUs, and kind of all the software to kind of support those pieces of hardware and things like that. And other companies will pay Arm to use their designs and their intellectual property. And that's kind of how they work. So instead of Arm producing the hardware themselves, they create the designs, and then other people spend money to use those designs and work with Arm. So that means that Arm technology is in everything from like light bulbs to mobile phones to even like the most powerful supercomputer in the world that runs on Arm technology. So yeah, it's a really exciting place to work. So hopefully I can convey some of that today.
Perfect. Thank you very much both for introducing yourselves and for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to starting our discussion in a moment. But first, I just wanted to say that there is going to be a chance at the end of the discussion for you guys to ask questions of Katie and Paris too. So as we go, if you do have questions, if you just pop them in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you see a question that someone's put forward that you would really like answering, upvote it, because we'll be keeping an eye to see which are the most popular questions. If I could just ask you that you keep your questions specific to today's topic of women in STEM, but at the same time, we do want to keep this as useful as possible to as many people as possible. So I know you all have individual questions, but bear this in mind when asking questions. Is it going to be useful to everybody? Well, as many people. So great, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Hopefully we'll get through the majority of them. But for now, I'm going to head back to Katie and Paris, and I'd like to start off with the basics first, really. What does it mean when employers use phrases such as women in STEM? Paris, maybe if you could go first.
So when I think of the phrase of women in STEM, so I think that those who have joined are hopefully familiar with what STEM stands for, right? Science, technology, engineering, and maths. To me, so my employer uses that in the sense of how many women are in positions in engineering, again in my company, how many women fill positions in engineering? So it's kind of just understanding what's the breakdown between the genders of men and women within our engineering department worldwide. Actually, Cummins is a worldwide company. We have over 40,000 employees, basically, again, worldwide. And so we try to just acknowledge the numbers, again, of men and women in our engineering departments. So that's what Cummins looks at it with.
Great. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is why it's kind of a discussion. So obviously there are less women than men in STEM overall just now, but I guess the reason why people and companies are talking about increasing the number of women in STEM is because they want to get it to a point where it becomes self-sustaining, where there are enough female role models that the next generation of women will like keep going into STEM. That's what the kind of discussion is quite often around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. When I first started at TARGETjobs working on the STEM sectors, I can remember the figure was 8% of women in engineering. I can remember the slogan, 8% is not enough. And it's not. And I was looking at I've always looked at the statistics, and WISE published more in 2019, and the hope is to have 30% of women in STEM roles by 2030. So hopefully, and they say that based on current trends, we're on track to achieve that. But I guess that's why women in STEM is so important at employers to achieve those targets.
I mean, and part of the importance, right, if you think about it, the fact, so of course, gender differences are a big thing about how our minds think, right? So when you have different people thinking in different ways, like obviously Katie and I grew up in completely different places, right? We're going to think differently. We're going to kind of approach problems in a different way. And so I think historically, if you think about if you have the same group of people that come from the same place, they're more likely to kind of think the same things if they've had the same experiences. So by introducing the very simple aspect of women from those same places, they're going to think completely differently. And so again, at my company, that's one of the things, and I'm sure, Katie, it's the same at yours. We want this presence of different ways of thinking. And one of the ways you get that is by having more women, right? We just biologically tend to think, we process things differently, we see things differently. And so similar, like that's, again, one of the reasons why we are interested in trying to understand the numbers and to just see, like you said, Katie, to keep it self-sustaining. One of the other things that I find quite rewarding, at least so at Cummins, is we're encouraged to attend things like this so that we can get more women into STEM. We're encouraged to go to schools and talk to all young people about engineering jobs, because once it becomes a normal thing, you're not looking at it going, oh, there's only 8% of women. Once it becomes something and normal, then you don't think about it anymore. And so that's kind of what I hope, is that one day people look at me and go, oh, she's just an engineer, not a female engineer. And so again, that's something that our company works towards very much. So is if I understand how many women are in our STEM roles, then I no longer have to pay attention to it. So.
No, exactly. That's the end goal, which is kind of my next question really is, so we want to achieve this and we want to encourage and inspire aspiring female students into the sector. So what do you think the STEM industry is doing to help bring more female students into those job roles? Katie, would you like to?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, I know at ARM we're doing a lot of work trying to just go into schools more generally, not necessarily specifically targeting women, but targeting everyone and making sure everyone has the experience to try out tech and have access to just explore that kind of field and see if they're interested in it. Because obviously some people at home might be more encouraged to go into STEM and have access to kind of various like technology things in their like at home that are not necessarily have the resources to like have access to. So yeah, just going into like I say, going to schools, going along to events like this, those are things that ARM are doing to kind of encourage everyone and like give everyone access to see if STEM is for them.
I think the other thing that similar right at Cummins, but some of the other things is I think we've taken a step back and analyzed our, we call flexible working hours, right? And I think a lot of companies, especially given the past 7 months, are doing this as well. But even before that, you know, the encouragement comes from your boss or from your manager or from the company itself, that if you need to take the afternoon off to, again, if we talk about something that is very, it's of course applicable to men and women, but very applicable to women is when you have children, right? If you want to have children, there are certain things that the men can't do, right? So if you're encouraged to work flexibly, right? So if that's a concern of some people, or they're trying to understand if they want to have a family versus remaining in an engineering career that might be a little bit more demanding, a lot of employers are making sure that it's easy to balance your work and your life. And again, this is not just applicable to women, but I think that that's something that some women might have in the back of their minds. So that's certainly something that's changed, especially over this past year. I'm trying to think of what else. I think the other thing too is, and again, it Cummins, just encouraging people to be their full selves at work, right? Bring your full self to work. So how you see me now is exactly how I appear at work. And I feel like, again, it applies to everybody, but at the same time, sometimes I know I've felt in the past like I had to conform to something. If I wanted to, I've been in places where it's just me and 13 guys. It's a company I worked at, and no problem, it was okay. But there are definitely certain things where I felt like I can't say this, or I have to just kind of conform to what they're saying. And I think that we're realizing more as we go along that that's not a good way to work. You don't end up bringing your best ideas to work or feeling comfortable at work if you can't bring your full self. So again, I think that a lot of STEM industries are encouraging people to be their full selves, whatever that ends up meaning. And I also think that when you normalize women in the workplace, and you normalize all types of women in the workplace, not just, again, this stereotypical female nerd who doesn't feel like wearing makeup or something like this. When you normalize all sorts of women in the workplace and all sorts of STEM jobs, then it becomes a more open place. So again, I think that a lot of STEM industries and companies are really encouraging this aspect of it, which to me is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of advice, and it's advice that's come up again and again. And I think with time, it's becoming less a piece of advice that can't be followed, and more it's happening. Like at TARGETjobs, we hold a couple of events called It's Not Just for the Boys and Future Female Engineers, and we get some really great engineers attending, giving advice, and being yourself is something that comes up at every event, and it just shows how important it is. And I think more and more employers are catching on to how important that is as well.
I wouldn't choose to work somewhere where I couldn't bring my full self. And I think that, yeah, again, it is really wonderful to see kind of the change within the STEM industry that's realizing this in a predominantly male industry that's realizing, again, we can benefit from everybody bringing their full self to work. But possibly sometimes even more so for women who have felt marginalized at work in the past.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me on. Also, one thing I wanted to discuss is some of the barriers that women often or typically face when taking up STEM careers. And I think we've touched on some, but I just wanted to cover that topic a little bit more, if that's okay.
I mean, I can start if you want. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, from my experience, I don't think women are ever really, well, I've never seen a woman being discouraged from going into STEM. And in some cases, like in my case, I was like actively encouraged by like my family and my teachers to go into STEM. But the place where I think there is not enough being done, or we need to think of a way around this, is in the area of like everything around STEM. So not like sitting in like a computer science class at school, that like women are getting the same education there. It's the things outside the classroom, like some group, like I guess I wasn't included in like the typical group of like nerdy people that were interested in going into computer science. So they were doing their like, I don't know, modding, Minecraft, coding type projects in their free time together. And meanwhile, I was kind of more isolated from that because I didn't have a group of friends that were interested in coding and interested in going into STEM. So, and there are other things like that, like having access to, I don't know, coding type resources at home and like being encouraged at home. But that one thing I think we need to work out is how we can encourage women to pursue STEM outside the classroom as well as inside, because they might not necessarily be included in the friend groups that are just doing that kind of thing in their free time anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I found engineering was so I actually went to an all-girls high school, and there happened to be a robotics club. I have no idea. And I thought, oh, that kind of sounds interesting. And that's how I found engineering. I would have, who knows, maybe I would have ended up in engineering anyway. But like you say, I think that a lot of the time, so one of the things that I like to do, right, is to continue talking about it over and over. I've seen when we assign gender roles to things, right, that's when you end up missing out. I just remember a story of a friend of mine. His daughter was like 3 years old and she was in the preschool, and the teacher said something like, "Oh, you can't do that. That's for boys." And he actually heard this and was like, no, she can do whatever she wants, right? And so I think these are kind of these unconscious barriers that we don't realize. And I think that, so that's an unfortunate barrier, something being unconscious and not something that you can really see easily. But I think that that's something that we all kind of need to work on and recognize in ourselves when we're saying to little kids, right? Or, oh, I'm not good at this because I'm female, right? Or these types of things, and kind of so these are kind of unconscious barriers that I kind of see. I'm trying to think of what else. I think I kind of mentioned the aspect of having children too, right? There are a lot of, so I know in the US, you don't get a lot of maternity leave or paternity leave. So I think that this is something that I think a lot of people think about too, right? I've known of experiences where prospective employers have asked women about their child plans in interviews. These types of barriers, again, it's maybe an unconscious thing, but these types of things where, can you imagine a man being asked that in his interview? And the answer is normally no. So I don't really know where I'm going with that, but the childcare and things like that, I think in general are a big barrier that might prevent women from taking up STEM careers. Given, I mean, engineering is certainly not it's not necessarily a use your hands type of constantly backbreaking work, but I'm having a pretty stressful day at work today, just sitting here at my desk. And the idea of managing that with a family, I'm certainly sure that scares a lot of people. Keep thinking.
You just mentioned, like, engineering isn't always a backbreaking, hands-on Joe, and I think that's important because I think there are some misconceptions or like maybe misleading stereotypes that potentially do put people off from even considering a career in engineering in the first place. So maybe let's take this opportunity to break some of those misconceptions or stereotypes. Do you have any in mind that you think that's not true?
Yeah, that's actually, so I work in the automotive sector, right? And so I think that a lot of people think, oh, you must be working on cars. I mean, if only I got to work on cars all day, that would be great. But you know, what I do on a daily basis is I'm presented with a problem, right? Or there's some sort of failure, or I need to design something, and when I was working in the office, I was back and forth between the lab, you know, kind of analyzing parts, talking with people, discussing problems, and then back to my desk, honestly, at my desk, probably 80% of the time, working with software, with Excel, with some coding software, Katie, that maybe you wouldn't consider coding, like MATLAB. But, you know, you really kind of get a well-rounded toolbox of computer programs that you get to work with they're very, very powerful. And there's a ton of science even in those, just designing those computer programs. But a lot of engineering, and Katie kind of touched on it, is problem solving. Is you have something in front of you and you need to figure out how to solve it. And you work with people constantly. You know, I'm always talking with my colleagues, discussing things, trying to figure out problems. So it's not, you know, underneath the hood of a car, changing bolts and stuff. Every once in a while, I get the pleasure of building a turbocharger and helping to write a test plan. But for the most part, it's very much in front of the computer and a social job, really. How do you connect with people, and how do you network with people, and how do you work together to jointly solve a problem?
Yeah, I can kind of like build on that. So, I mean, with software engineering roles, I think there's a stereotype that the people in software engineering aren't social, and two, it's a lot of working on your own. But actually, the systems that we work with are so complicated and so large, I guess, that it would be impossible to do that on your own. So there's a lot of just talking between, like asking other people how certain aspects of what you're trying to do work and why something isn't working, things like that. Like, it would be impossible for it to be like a solo thing. You need to work in, like, constantly work in a team, do a bit of work, something's not working, why is it not working, talk to the person that knows why it's not working, go back and continue with that knowledge you've acquired from them. It would be impossible for it to be a non-social thing, in my opinion.
Which is why this whole working from home thing has been so difficult. But
No, you're right. I was looking forward to the webinar. I thought, oh, it's a social aspect. I can speak to people. I can hear people. Great. I also just wanted to circle back actually to a point Katie made about, you know, getting people involved in STEM activities outside of the classroom, because, okay, maybe, for example, there might be a female student who hasn't been encouraged to get involved outside the classroom. Is there anything that comes to mind for you, like, oh, I would advise that they go do this, I would advise that they look into this?
I mean, for me, it really comes down to do what you like, right? And I know that's such stupid advice, but just because, I mean, oh, there's someone at my door. Sorry, I really apologize. I need to go check that. I'll be right back.
Don't worry, we'll carry on.
I can continue. Yeah. So how to encourage people outside the classroom. Okay, so I think one thing would be having activity, like companies and things come into schools and provide experiences that you wouldn't get from just taking a course. So things like, I mean, I also joined a robotics club, like Paris was saying she did. So I was actually the first person in the club that was like a girl. So that I think that there's probably work to be done to encourage girls to join these clubs, like having teachers be like, hey, I think you're good at this subject, so you should go and work in a project in this club in this area. Just like that kind of encouragement that's encouraging going beyond what we're being taught in the classroom, and providing resources and things like that is also quite a useful way to like providing resources so girls can go and work on a project they're interested in. So like giving out one of like the BBC microbits and being like, hey, you could use this to like make some wearable like tech fashion accessory or something that might bring together both their interest in coding and other interests they might have in design and things like that. Just I think just that advice of work on things that you're interested in, like, and do projects in those areas to kind of see where you might want to go in a job and what you might want to work on. That's the I think that works for a lot of people.
Great, thank you. Paris, was there anything you wanted to add now you're back with us? Or
Yeah, and sorry, he's going to come back, so I'll have to jump for a second. Apologies. I mean, I think the other thing too is there are so many resources, and I think you're kind of saying that, right? If you think about at university, right, or I mean, all these different clubs, these types of things. I think the other thing too is a lot of the time we forget that there are our family members and friends around us that also have these types of jobs. It wasn't until I was interested in engineering that I realized, you know, my grandfather worked for GM, General Motors, for 20 years, 30 years. And I never even thought about that just because he was my grandfather. And so I think that sometimes you can, you know, cousins' boyfriends or cousins' girlfriends or things like that, just kind of think about the social group that you have around yourself and see what resources you might be able to find there. I think that's also something overlooked a lot of the time.
no, that's really good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess once students have been at university, they've engaged in these extracurriculars, they're ready to look for more formal work experience or formal graduate opportunities. Katie, I'm going to start with you again. Could you maybe tell us what opportunities there are for female students at ARM or in the industry more widely?
Yeah, so I don't know how broad to make this, but at ARM, I think regardless of whether you've done a degree in computer science or engineering, if you have the kind of interest and kind of gathered some coding experience or maybe some projects you've done in your free time, if you can like demonstrate that you kind of have the base skills, then I think ARM would be more than happy to take on either interns or take you on as an intern or a graduate, depending whether or not you've graduated or not, basically. So yeah, ARM have a variety of different graduate roles in the areas of like engineering, software engineering, just kind of like I say, the whole range of ARM support things from like IoT devices to mobile phones to things like that. So if you're interested in writing software, there is probably a role in ARM that's going to be interesting to you. Similarly with things like electronic engineering.
I'm sorry, Rachel, can you repeat the question? I'm really sorry.
Of course I can, it's not a problem at all. I hope it's getting sorted for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the question was once a student has engaged at university, they're ready to look for opportunities out there in industry. Mm-hmm. What opportunities are there for students interested in STEM careers at Cummins or even more widely in the industry?
I mean, too many to count, right? So if I think about, trying not to say too close onto automotive engineering, but even within our engineering, right? So we have engineering, the functions that support the work that I do, supply chain, quality, you have manufacturing. I mean, so yes, I sit there and I have a problem to solve. That's kind of something in general, but right now I work as a customer engineer. So I'm at my customer discussing with them their requirements, trying to figure out what fits them. Quality engineering, when you have a failure or you need to predict how often something might fail, it's a totally different side of what I do. Supply chain, it is so fabulous to have people who understand how things are made. the process by which things are made in a supply chain role where they can give feedback. If I give a drawing to the supplier and the supplier says, no, I can't make this. If you're a supply chain engineer who has the understanding of how parts are made, that's another side of it. You're so much more valuable to me than sending a drawing to a supplier and them saying, no, we can't do it. And you going, sorry, we can't do it. So, I mean, those are just the functions that support what I do. And yet engineering and science within them is extremely valuable. If we kind of move away from automotive engineering and you think about chemical engineering, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I mean, there are so many, there's an immeasurable amount of things that you can do within STEM roles. And I think the other thing too is you don't necessarily need to be an engineer, right? If I think about, trying to think of some other functions that we have, any sort of different perspective that you can bring to as an engineer into a non-engineering role, or even then sometimes, you know, if you have a broken washing machine, I don't care if you have an engineering degree, if you can figure out how to fix that, then you can join a STEM role, right? Some of it's a little bit about common sense and understanding how to step through things. So, I mean, we definitely have had, at least at Cummins, you know, our engineering roles are open to people who have studied physics, right? Who maybe don't have this kind of mechanical engineering background, who have maybe never picked up a wrench or a spanner, never picked up a spanner or something like that. So you don't necessarily need to have an engineering degree to work in a STEM position. And I think the other way around too. I could go do something else that wasn't engineering with the knowledge that I have from my engineering degrees. It's how you transfer that knowledge, right? And I think that that's also something that a lot of people look at job applications, right? And if you say, oh, you need to have an engineering degree, just apply. If you don't have an engineering degree, you have a physics or a maths degree or something like this, just apply, because a lot more employers, and Cummins included, are looking for an employee, right? They're not looking for an engineer. They want somebody who's well-rounded, who has a head on their shoulders, who is a social person, who can engage and work with others. You know, yes, your CV and your resume are important, and they have some aspect that contributes to getting the foot through the door, but a lot of the time it's how you interact in the interview. We've hired people who have never ever seen a turbocharger before in their life, and they're some of the best engineers that I work with, and that's fabulous, right? So
perfect, thank you. And you know, we've touched on throughout this the importance of diversity of thought, but I just want it would be silly not to touch on it again in this webinar. Why is it so important for more women to work in what is often associated as a male-dominated industry?
said normalizing.
I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's definitely this diversity of thought idea. This is the main drive, like the main reason we want to get more women to STEM, and people from all backgrounds. If you have more people with more unique perspectives, you're more likely to come up with innovative solutions and not just keep trying the same old ideas again and again. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think that's my perspective. I don't know if you've got anything to build on that, Paris.
Yeah, I mean, again, to me it's about normalizing, right? It's so just a quick story. When I was 16 or 18 or something, I wanted to get a tattoo, and I told my dad I wanted to get a tattoo. So I'm 32 now, so this was almost 15 years ago, which wasn't exactly the dark ages, but certainly is a little bit different than today, and engineers who are starting in university today. I told my father I wanted to get a tattoo, and he looked at me and he said, yeah, right. No way are you getting a tattoo. And I said, well, no, I want one. And again, whatever. I was 18. I could, in theory, do whatever I want. And we had a bit of a chat about it. And my father's concern was that you don't need one more thing against you in the career that you're going into. You're going to be a female in engineering. You don't need to stand out anymore with something that people will hold against you. And 18-year-old Paris said, well, if a company wants to hold a tattoo against me, then I don't want to work for that company. But the fact that he had to feel that way, right? And to say that to me, that's why we need more women in engineering. Or in STEM. That's why we need more women who have tattoos all over their body in STEM, right? That's why we need this diversity of people such that my father doesn't have to worry that I'm going to be not listened to because of what I look like. And so that's why we need more women in STEM.
Did you get your tattoo?
I did, yeah.
Good.
many years later. And the best part of it was I was like, Papa, where I want it, you can't even see the tattoo. Like, but no, I mean, again, it's about this normalizing. You know, I want there to be all sorts of everybody. You know, you walk into, and I have to say that Cummins does a great job. Does a great job. It's a natural thing that happens because of the culture and the values of the company. In Huddersfield, we were like our own mini world. At our technical center, you had people from every continent there, and it was just a real pleasure to interact with and learn things, not just at work, but socially outside of work. Those people are my best friends, and so yeah, again, just that kind of normalizing is the bottom line for me.
Perfect, great. And so then I'm going to carry on into my last question before we pass over and get some questions from listeners. But I'm going to end with, from me, what are your tips for female students wanting to make a career in STEM? Like your tips for success, I guess.
Well, I think the theme that I've really driven home here, that if anybody's missed, is be yourself. I know that the idea of finding a job or the idea of finding an internship can be really stressful. That is the joy of having the opportunity to do internships, right? Is you can find a place that you fit into. And I think that of course, I know that, you know, you need money to live, you need these types of things. But at the same time, I just really encourage people to find a place and to check out different places that they really feel that they fit in, because you spend a ton of time working and you might as well do something that you like. And if you're going to be in a place where you feel uncomfortable, or you're constantly checking your back, or you just don't feel like your voice is heard, that is really going to destroy your life. So I think that's my top tip, is try different places, talk to people. I mean, that's another thing. If you think about, people love to talk about themselves, right? So go on LinkedIn, or I don't know, other places, maybe TargetJobs has something, a forum too, where you can contact engineers, find them. People are always interested in say, you know, I'm an aspiring engineer. Do you have any information? Do you have any thoughts? You know, people want to tell you about their experiences. And I think that this is a really good way to network, a really good way to make connections, especially given the current world that we're in right now, where it does kind of need to be online, and it does need to be over email likely. It's not a bad way to start. Just ask people about their experiences.
Yeah, so I'll add my tips. So I think there's kind of a myth that women can't. Well, some people might believe that women can't succeed in STEM, but I think it's just not true. Like, there are, like, not only can women succeed in STEM, but I think everyone, at least in companies like ARM, want women to be succeeding in STEM, and it makes them uncomfortable that there's this like there are fewer women than men in STEM. They want it to be equal, and they want to be able to say, yes, I work for a diverse and inclusive workplace where everyone is valued and everyone can succeed. So everyone wants that. in these companies. And it's just this, I think it's almost an external stereotype, or maybe belief in some companies that women just can't make it to the top. But I think if you kind of make an effort to put that idea to the side, it's going to help you get to where you want to be, if that makes sense. So obviously there are issues that women face that men will never face, but you can't, like, that's not going to stop you. Like, if you put the time and effort in, you can succeed in STEM field. And a good starting point for, I'd say, at least in software engineering roles and electronic engineering roles, is going into doing your own projects in the kind of areas you might want to work in, and seeing, one, if that's interesting to you, and two, giving you something you can talk about in an interview to show that you're passionate and show that you're interested in that area. So even if you don't have the deepest knowledge of a certain area, they at least know that you're willing to learn, and they'll be able to train you up in that area.
That's a key point, Katie. Yeah, like I said, it's if you don't have the knowledge, you know where to get it, and you're interested in learning it. So it's not a concern if you don't have the knowledge. I mean, every new role I've started, I have degrees in engineering, but everything is different. I have no idea what I'm doing the moment I start this role. And it's that propensity to be inquisitive and to be curious and to try and want to know where things come from. And that's a good tip.
Great. And something that's come up with me before when speaking to other female engineers is the importance of mentoring from senior female engineers or employee support groups. So those things that you found at your companies, and you find them helpful?
Yeah. You'll go, Katie.
I'll go first, then you can. Yeah. So at Arm we have like the Women's Network, who run events like having, so on, I think it was for International Women in Engineering Day, they ran a full day of women speakers from the company talking about what they've worked on and what they've achieved, and how other women can kind of, like, what other women should do to kind of boost their chances of success. And personally, I mean, Arm does other stuff in the area of helping mentoring, but personally, I also do mentoring outside of work. So I've met other women that are interested in engineering through schemes like Code First Girls, and I've taken them on and helped them improve their CV and like trying to get them their first role in tech, even though they're not from a tech background, they just have some coding knowledge. Yeah, that's all I have there.
No, that's not all. That's great. How about you, Paris?
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. It's gone out of my head.
No problem. If it comes back,
Sorry.
It comes back, shout. Okay, so I think now I'm going to give a bit more time to the student questions, because we've got quite a few coming in, which is really nice. So the first question I'm going to ask is submitted. I was wondering, what kind of things do you think would increase the proportion of women of colour in STEM? Less than 5% of working engineers are women in colour. Perhaps focus on what your organisations are doing to encourage a diverse workforce.
Yeah, I mean, I know what I look like. I'm aware of that. I mean, it's a very good question. And I don't know if I can answer it with anything different than what I've already said. I mean, so at Cummins, we too have these, we call them employee resource groups. We have employee resource groups for, so in the US, we have, again, it's I don't know exactly what the title is, but I mean, we have the Indian employee resource group, the Chinese employee resource group. We really try to, again, it's about being able to be comfortable and to spread your distinct experiences and background with your colleagues. So that's something that we have at all the sites at Cummins worldwide. We have these different employee resource groups, and some of them are targeted at backgrounds and things of this nature. I mean, I know that it is something that Cummins does pay attention to. When I worked in Charleston, in South Carolina in the US, it was something that we really paid attention to. I mean, Cummins really, like I said, I'm not sure I can answer with anything different other than encouraging diversity. And I do know that the numbers are even lower when it comes to women of color. So I don't know if I have a really good answer on that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to ARM, they have similar, they've got the Women's Network. They've also got a group for people of color. But I think I think my answer to getting more women of color into STEM is similar to my answer for getting more women into STEM, which is just making tech accessible in a way that might not be to certain groups of people for whatever reason. So just coming into schools and making these resources available so they can try out tech and see if it's for them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Katie. And it's not like we target schools. So similar. We try to go into all schools from all over. Again, when I worked in Charleston, there were certain areas that we targeted. Some of those were predominantly people of color, and we really people of color attended those schools, and we make it again, it's trying to get this equal access and equal opportunity to hear about these jobs, right? Hear about engineering, hear about the opportunities. So.
Great, thank you for answering. And the next question is, I studied a humanities degree but can code. Could I still apply for STEM graduate roles?
Yeah. I think, yeah.
Next question.
Yeah. By all, again, it's about the person, right? So yeah, maybe your initial thing, you says degrees in humanities, but you have all these certificates in coding. Go for it. And that's, again, part of it is find that company that goes, this person must have something special going on if they went from humanities to coding. I wonder what they can offer. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, conversely, if you do a computer science degree and then don't do any projects, you won't be able to get a job because you won't have anything to talk about in an interview. So It's more about having a project to talk about and being able to demonstrate you have skills you can apply to a project in the workplace rather than just the name of your degree. But I had this experience myself with an interview. I was interviewing for an internship, and I was in my third year of my 4-year university degree, but I just couldn't answer any question they were asking me because I just didn't have any projects under my belt to talk about. So then conversely, when I worked on a few projects, then I had tons to talk about in the interview. So like I say, it's not about the degree, it's about having skills that you can apply to a project in the workplace.
And would you say that's the case across the board for all STEM roles, or are there some that are more open to people who have got all the great extracurriculars but maybe a non-STEM degree? Or are there others that are more, you probably need a STEM degree? It's
definitely the case for coding roles that you don't need a degree in it. I can't say for other roles because I don't have experience in those areas.
I mean, the only thing is, yes, you might be at a disadvantage, right? Because you're missing, I mean, if I think about mechanical engineering, if you haven't studied dynamics and you don't understand how physics work, then you have to have the desire to learn that on your own, right? So if you're really interested in it and you find a job that you kind of think fits, then you have to be able to display the fact that you're willing to learn or that you've done things to learn. I mean, if you come in with a humanities degree and try to apply to an engineering degree without any sort of background of anything, it's just not going to work, right? It's about that whole piece of you. So, but again, yeah, I also can't totally say for everything.
No problem, thank you. And so I'll move on to the next one, which is I'm doing my PhD in chemistry. I wanted to explore some internships, work experience in industries such as consulting, etc., but most of those opportunities are for undergraduate students. How can we find women in STEM opportunities at various firms for PhD students?
I was going to say, this is something I'm actually looking for the answer to right now, because someone recently asked me about PhD, like how you could join ARM as a PhD student, and that's something I need to ask around people, honestly. Like, there just don't seem to be, I guess because there are fewer people doing PhDs than undergraduates, they put lots of job listings up for the undergraduates, so it's probably a case of perhaps applying for those and writing in your cover letter what you're interested in doing, and maybe getting redirected to the right place, or speaking directly to the people doing the hiring and seeing if you could go a more direct route to a role, because there are just less generic roles up for people that have done PhDs. Not that there are less opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that maybe you apply to the more experienced role because you have the PhD and you kind of explain that. Or similarly, I mean, we had somebody who did a PhD with Cummins, and she finished her PhD and then she was hired as a graduate engineer. But within 2 months, her manager said, she's not a graduate engineer, and bumped her to the next level, right? So I think that a lot of people think that, like you said, put it in your cover letter. There are humans reading these, right? Like, we're not robots that just go, nope, check, doesn't have it, move on. Again, it's a social process of reading things and understanding and going, maybe this fits here. When people look for jobs, right, they don't want to they want to find somebody who fits the job, right? So at the same time, I might be looking for one, but I know of 4 other ones that exist. And okay, maybe this person, they don't have full experience working, but this actually might be more applicable. So, but yeah, like what Katie said, put it in your cover letter. That's the whole beauty of having a cover letter. It's a conversation that you get to have with the people you're applying to.
Perfect. The next one, have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome as women working in STEM careers? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Every day. There's no overcoming it. So just accept it and move on. No. Yeah, I mean, this is something that honestly, I've had a lot of conversations with my fellow engineers, both male and female. It is not a unique thing to women by any means. And I would like to break that stereotype that it's unique to women. Perhaps we internalize it a little bit more and process it different ways. But yeah, every day. I mean, like I said, I have 3 degrees in mechanical engineering. I've worked in automotive engineering for 10 years, and I have imposter syndrome every single day. And it's just something that you have to sit there and remind yourself, no, I know what I'm doing. Let's do this. And again, maybe that's horrible advice, but similarly, talk about it with your colleagues, right? I'm feeling like this, like I don't know what I'm doing here. And I guarantee you they will say, I feel the same way. So again, to me, it's the way to fix it is to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I would say that if you're open about what you don't understand, then you can overcome that. But I mean, I understand there might be a stereotype around women suffering more from imposter syndrome in engineering subjects, just because you might feel that because you don't necessarily fit in with the stereotype for that role. But it is something that everyone feels, and there's I think some people try and pretend they don't feel it and pretend that they can get on with something even if they don't necessarily know what they're doing. That's not a good way of getting around it. Like, the good way to get around it is actually ask lots of questions and work out what you don't know. So you're like, okay, now I know that. I don't have to worry about not knowing that.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, that's all.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And just my next question now, what advice would you have to gain work experience after finishing a BSc? I'm struggling to start my career with a lack of experience.
I think small companies are a good place to look. Asking companies, like reaching out by email and asking if they have anything available for someone that has whatever your skill set is. So, because a lot of the time they won't post roles, but they would really appreciate having someone extra in the team. And that also benefits you because you can get more experience in industry. So even, I mean, you could, yeah, I think going to and asking directly to smaller companies that won't have these big job listings is a good way forward, because it costs them money to post a job listing, but they might actually really benefit from having an extra person. If you just come forward and be like, hey, I'm looking for this, do you need this? Then if they are looking for that, then they're going to be like, yes, please. We don't have to pay to hire, like, get someone to go and find someone for us. We can just go directly. So I think that's how I got one of my internships. Actually, I couldn't find an internship anywhere because, like I said, I didn't have any coding projects under my belt. So I went to somewhere directly and they were like, yeah, we'll take you on. You can try doing this. And I got more experience.
I would also say, again, leverage the network that you have from your university. I mean, there's alumni networks, there are like career counseling, right? Those are great ways to find a personal connection with somebody who might know somebody who knows somebody. And again, if you're struggling to find a place that will take you because you don't have experience, I think the best way to get into that is somebody who kind of vouches for you and says, you know, this person needs experience. Do you have anything? So really look at those alumni associations and the career counseling from your university, even if you graduated a year or two prior, right? That's what they're there for.
Yeah. Also, if you don't feel like you networked well or whatever at university, a way you can continue networking even after leaving university, it would be volunteering. So even if it's not volunteering directly in the role you want to do, volunteering generally in an engineering area, maybe helping teach kids engineering skills, then you'll be connected with other people that are going to be teaching kids engineering skills and maybe work for a certain company and be able to vouch for your skills in the same way. Your network generally would be able to vouch for you.
Great, thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So would you say mentioning women in STEM in interviews or applications is advantageous, or would it come across as cliche?
I mean, again, I work towards normalizing things, right? So I think that discussing women in STEM is certainly important. I'm not totally sure when we say mentioning it in interviews, if you mean like saying, hi, I'm a woman, I want to be in STEM. I'm not totally sure. But you want to get the job because of your qualifications. So that's my one, and that's also the only way that we're going to continue to not have to justify why somebody was hired for a role. So put your best foot forward with what your CV says and who you present yourself as. That's what you should do. I don't think, I mean, they can, if you present as, if your outer appearance is presented as female, they're going to know that you're female, right? If that's how you choose to represent your gender. I don't think there's any reason to mention it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I can't think of a way that would be natural to mention women in STEM in an interview unless you had a project in that area. So if you'd done lots of work and it happened to be to promote women in STEM and it's relevant to your role, then like, of course you can mention that. But I don't see how you would otherwise either want to mention it in particular, because I mean, like, they can probably guess that you're a woman in STEM if you're at the interview. Like, I can't see a way that it would either benefit or hinder you. It would just be kind of like, oh, okay, that got mentioned for some reason. I don't know. Maybe if there was more detail on the question, it would make more sense. But I don't see the benefit in bringing it up unless it's a specific reason, like a project, like coding a website to promote women in STEM or something like that.
Yeah, I think what you said there, Katie, is really good in terms of if you've actively been involved in, maybe you've been mentoring school students and you've actively been engaged in that topic, then yeah, that will show your passionate interview. But yeah, maybe bringing it up for the sake of it isn't on the same level as if you're demonstrating what you've done yourself to encourage more women into STEM. I think that's great.
And then just a really quick one, because I saw a question here that I think might not get as much addressing, and I wanted to mention it because Cummins has something that's called a repower program. So somebody asked about taking a break, raising a family, and wanting to go back into industry. Tons of companies have like reintroducing programs. So Cummins has something called Cummins Repower program, and it's honestly targeted at everybody, but a lot of women end up in it. If you've had a break from engineering position after 4 years, they welcome you back into a kind of a internship type role with the promise of a permanent position at a level that's appropriate for you. So I just wanted to mention that quickly because we've talked a lot more about like graduate level type things. And this is a way that you can go back into a professional position. And a lot of companies have this to try and get more people back into their careers later in life.
It's really helpful. Thank you, Paris.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say before we wrap up, a big thank you to both of you. It's been really lovely talking to you. And I know everyone feels the same. We have a comment from Tammy saying, not a question here, but express my thank you. You are so inspirational. So thank you both very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
Great. Then I believe our work here is done today. Thank you.
All right. Have fun.
Have a good
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Okay.